Please do not try any of what you're about to see at home. Me and my friends have already done this activity, so you don't have to. And let's be honest, it's safer that way. Paper. It's an object that's increasingly becoming obsolete in our technological society. Instead of reading a paperback book, you can read an ebook. Instead of writing out an essay on a sheet of paper, you can just type it on a computer. Paper may seem useless. What if I told you that paper used to be an armor material? The ancient Chinese first invented paper, and there's historical evidence that shows that they also made suits of armor out of paper. This is not an ancient suit of Chinese armor, but it's pretty darn close. This is what we're going to be testing with. These little shingles are 8 individual sheets of paper that have been taped together and folded together. We're going to be shooting this, stabbing this, and then shooting it again. Hopefully, we're going to see what the limitations of this type of armor are, and we're also going to hopefully see it resist most of the weapons that we test. First, let's start with our bows. For those of you who didn't see what happened, the arrow hit the armor, but it simply bounced off the armor. To try and see if we can get a bow that has a little bit more force that can punch through the armor, we've gotten a bigger bow. Ready? So, clearly it went through. However, we also used a bow with 60 pounds of draw weight, and the previous one only had 17 pounds. So, this is what it takes apparently to be able to punch through the armor with a bow and arrow. But, after shooting with bows, let's see what happens when we try to cut up this armor with something a little bit more close and personal. Clearly, our little baby crossbow did hit the armor. However, we looked past the armor and it only penetrated less than 1/4 of an inch. Realistically speaking, that's a flesh wound. So, we're going to see if a slightly bigger crossbow can somehow punch through this with the same amount of effects as our bigger compound bow did. We've done long range, but now, if our soldiers survived our long range attacks, we're going to try and see what happens if a close range weapon comes in. First, our sword. So, we've demonstrated slashing and hacking armor with a sword. And when it actually made contact with the armor, it didn't really go all the way through. The problem is, when you hit the string, everything disintegrates like here. So, if you try doing an extended battle with this with a sword, it's going to fall apart like here. But assuming that you survive all this, what's going to happen if something slightly smaller comes and hits the armor? Firearms are going to be used on the ancient Chinese battlefield. Since we don't have any kind of ancient Chinese firearms, we're going to see how modern firearms do. First of all, we're going to start with the smallest and then go to the big. Our first gun is a .22 caliber round hunting rifle. Ready?
Yep.
So we tried our .22 caliber round, and it did hit the armor. Unfortunately, it left a clean hole through the armor and then exited out our solid wood frame. So, if this little tiny bullet went through the armor, odds are any kind of larger bullet is going to go through the armor. But just because we want to, let's see what happens when we try an even bigger gun.
Good move. Go.
In case if you were wondering, what we just shot was a deer slug. This is more along the lines for fun. And if you noticed, it went through most of the armor and punched through a giant hole through our solid wood support. So, chances are you're dead. So that's it for our testing. And all for close range weapons, knives and swords. It just depends how much abuse the armor has taken before you go into battle with it. With bows and crossbows, it just depends on how big it is. The smaller the force that the crossbow and bow and arrow gives out, the less force it's going to impact on the armor, and thus we might have a degree of protection. And gunpowder weapons, unless if it's a really old gun or a really ineffective gun, paper armor is going to lose. And if you're wondering, yes, I did make this paper armor. It's made of 186 scales of paper. Each scales equals 8 sheets of paper, so there's about 1,488 sheets of paper here. And it only weighs 22 pounds, which is the original armor's purpose, to be light yet effective. Unfortunately, our test has shown that paper armor does have its limits. Thanks for watching, and please, do not try this at home.